Hello and welcome to Sallie Tomato. Here we enjoy bringing you tutorials and other creative videos that teach and inspire. Today's tutorial is a fun bag featuring our Oakley pattern. It has fringe detail, also a card pocket, and side gusset for shaping. Attaching a gusset can seem intimidating, but my goal in this tutorial is to show you how easy it can be. The name of our bag, Oakley, is inspired by the petite and renowned American sharpshooter Annie Oakley. When Annie Oakley performed, she often wore a costume or variety of costumes that were embellished with fringe. And of course, we brought fringe into our little Oakley pattern, but also you may see quite a bit of fringe detail in the fashions of the 1960s. Before we begin the tutorial, be sure to purchase the pattern. You can find the pattern and all the supplies needed on our website or request them at your local quilt shop. We encourage you to shop local whenever you can and support a local business. The supplies you need are listed on the back cover, and that also includes a list of helpful notions. All right, gather your supplies, cut out all the pieces you need. Remember, you can always pause the video as we progress. That way we're sewing at your pace. Are you ready? Let's get started. All right, be sure to follow your pattern's cutting instructions for the sizes and number of pieces you're going to need. If you like, you may find it helpful to label your pattern pieces. Just make sure that you're marking on the wrong side of your fabric pieces. So now we can continue and let's get into marking. Our first step is going to be shaping the pocket. So on the wrong side, you're going to measure up along the long edges, and your dimensions are in your pattern, so follow those. You'll also mark the center and you'll be drawing angled lines. So once you have your angled lines marked on the pocket, you'll simply cut along each angled line to shape the pocket, and we're ready to move on. Follow your instructions to measure and mark along the outer long edges and then the center, as well as the opposite long edge. Then you're going to draw your angled lines. Between those angled lines and following your pattern, you're going to be marking a set of parallel lines, beginning from the bottom edge up to the interior angled lines. This is going to create your fringe. You can see some of my lines aren't exactly perfect, and that's okay. As you watch, I'm going to be cutting and shaping so I can cut away that bottom angled line. And then you're going to cut the fringe following your marked lines and stopping at that angled mark line. Then simply cut along each marked line, just like I've done here. Remember to do this for your second main piece, a exterior piece. Here we have both of our exterior main pieces cut up to the marked inner angled lines. One option is to leave the bottom edge of your bag front and back straight, not cutting the angle. This gives a new look to your bag. And we're ready for the next step, which is optional, and that is to add interfacing. Now I'm using a very firm faux suede fabric, so I have decided I'm not going to add the interfacing because this fabric has so much body. But if you'd be selecting a fabric that was a lighter weight, or you just felt needed a little reinforcement, you would simply fuse your interfacing centered and then right up close to your top edge of your main pieces. And then also you could certainly do the same on the little edge of the pocket and just gently fuse that in place following the manufacturer's instructions. Or you could use, if you just had a non-fusible interfacing, a strip of basting tape right along that top edge would hold your interfacing piece in place. All right, so if you did add interfacing, you would have a natural fold line to fold down that top hem, but I'm not using the interfacing, so I'm simply going to fold down following the measurement in my pattern. You could certainly add a couple sewing clips or even basting tape. You could certainly use a little bit of basting tape along the inside edge of your hem and then hold that in place. We're going to go to the sewing machine and then stitch right across. And we're just simply going to stitch 2 rows of stitching along that hem. I'm using a very narrow foot, but you may find a Teflon foot works really well depending on the fabric that you've selected. And we'll do the same with the pocket with a smaller hem allowance. I'm going to show you just an option. You certainly could add a handmade label. A nice spot would be right below the top stitching. You would have the hardware showing on the wrong side of the pocket. You would definitely want to cover that so that anything that you would put in the pocket would be protected from the prongs and the washer that would be showing on the wrong side of the pocket. So I'm going to skip the handmade label for now, and we're going to attach the pocket to the front of our bag. So again, refer to your pattern for the measurement, and of course, this is your bag, so feel free to move the pocket down or up a little bit if you'd like. You can certainly use some basting tape placed on the wrong side of your pocket to help hold it in place as you sew. So let's get over to the sewing machine and stitch our pocket in place. Now this could be a fun spot to put small rivets right near the seam allowance. It helps secure and reinforce the pocket, but also you want to keep it close to your edge without cutting into the stitching so your pocket can be easily used as a card pocket. Just another note, for rivet placement, you could certainly put a rivet near the fold edge of your pocket, or like I'm going to do, place my rivets within or kind of between the top stitching of that pocket hem. And you'll insert through all layers, again being careful to not cut into your stitching with the punch. And be sure to check out our video tutorial on installing rivet hardware on our YouTube channel. Let's pound those rivets in place. All right, here we have the rivets installed. Again, very optional, but they add a nice touch. We're going to move on to prepare our gusset strip. Now again, refer to your pattern for marking the gusset for shaping. You'll measure in along the long edge and draw 2 indent shapes, very narrow rectangular shapes. This is going to make the gusset a little narrower near the short end, and you'll repeat for this opposite end of your gusset, measuring in and along the length side, and then cut out those indent pieces. Use a little heavier scissors here, and you'll see in just a minute why we want to cut out this little indent. Okay, then before we start sewing, we also need to mark the center of the gusset. And I'm just going to fold the gusset in half. You certainly could measure for more precise. Then we're going to thread the D-ring onto the end of the gusset and fold under, and again, follow your pattern instructions for the dimension or the amount to fold under. I'm going to hold this in place with a sewing clip. You certainly could install rivets going along the length at the center of your folded under gusset end, or I'm going to top stitch. It's going to be a little faster and it'll be as secure as using several rivets. So let's go to the machine and stitch close to the hardware. Having the extra layer of this gusset end helps stabilize and make the edge of your gusset more firm when you're using your bag in the end. And we'll repeat the process for the opposite end. All right, we have both D-rings attached to our gusset end. We're now ready to attach the gusset to our bag. So with the wrong side of the bag front facing up, we know where center is from the marking of the inner angle on the bag, and then simply align the center mark on the gusset right at the point of our marked line on the main bag. Now you could certainly use a basting tape. We're going to be sewing wrong sides together. It makes for very easy construction. I'm going to start at the very center and stitch towards the angle outer edge of the bag. And then we're going to sew with a narrow seam allowance to the outer edge of the bag. Stop with the needle down, and then we're going to pivot. Now you may find it easier, and you can only take the tiniest snip into your fabric of the gusset. You don't want to clip into your fringe area or your bag front, and you don't want to clip into your stitching line or the thread of your stitching. But that tiny little clip helps relax the gusset fabric, and you're going to then pivot and sew along the straight aligned edges. This is creating the side of your bag. And you're going to stop your sewing when you reach the end of your widest part of the gusset. That way you won't stitch into your hardware. And that is your first seam. I find it does help to use the very narrow foot because my needle is perfectly centered and I can begin sewing my next side. And also on this gusset point right at the center, it does help to make a very tiny snip right at that center mark on your gusset only. And it does help to have your gusset facing right side up on the top of the layers. It's easiest to stitch if the front or main part of your bag is on the sewing machine bed. All right, let's get this second half of the gusset attached. Again, stopping your seam allowance away from the edge of the bag itself. I'm going to remember to take my tiny little clip. You can see that little clip right there. That's just helping to relax the gusset fabric. And I'm also just pinching a little fold, holding it with my finger, the gusset, so it lays smooth along this outer edge. All right, we are ready to begin attaching the opposite edge of the gusset. This is your chance to decide one last time if you do want to add rivets or even a little stitching to hold the gusset end in place. I would recommend adding a piece of foam or heavy stabilizer, just a narrow strip between the layers of the gusset if you're going to add rivets. This is going to help support the rivets much better than just the 2 layers of fabric. All right, let's layer wrong sides together. Again, it's easiest if the gusset is right side up for attaching, and we're going to begin at the point, the lower point. So line up center mark on the gusset with our point at the angled center bottom edge before the fringe starts. And again, if you wanted a little narrow strip of basting tape will help hold that in place. One thought before we start stitching is take a tiny clip right at your center mark. Having that tiny little snip also helps me know where to line up on my wrong side. And I'm just taking a stitch to hold that center of the gusset in place while I arrange that side edge, long side edge of the gusset aligned to my drawn marking. The second half always takes a little longer than attaching the front. You have a lot more to work around. Again, you're going to stop at the seam allowance with the needle down in the fabric, holding all the layers secure. You can take that tiny little snip in only the gusset layer and then pivot your project. And I'm holding the little bit of the gusset fold so that my straight edges are all aligned. Remember to put the presser foot back down. Now you may find it much easier for this very last side to begin stitching near the top of your bag, keeping the gusset aligned and stitching down to the angled corner and then to the center. But for the sewing on the camera, I'm going to try so you can see a little more clearly. Again, with this narrow foot, I can stitch quite close. So I'm going to begin at the very center of the gusset. Again, just taking a couple reverse stitches to hold all the layers in place. Double check that your fringe is out of the way, stopping within the seam allowance of the bottom edge. And let's take a little clip or tiny snip right into just the gusset layer. Hold the gusset so that the edges are even with the bottom layer of fabric, and we'll stitch to the end. Sometimes it helps to just flatten the whole bag away from the seam that you're stitching. And the bag is complete. We're ready to create the strap. Create the adjustable strap using your remaining pieces D and the remaining hardware, and also check out a helpful video tutorial on our YouTube channel. Then we're ready to clip the adjustable strap right to the D-rings. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you really enjoy using your new Oakley bag or giving it as a gift to someone special. Remember, if you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment below. We'll do our best to answer those questions. We encourage you to share photos of your finished project using hashtag Sallie Tomato and hashtag Oakley Pattern on social media. If you found this tutorial helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you'll always know when a new video is here. Thanks so much for joining me, and have a great making day.